Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Renan Carvalho. I'm an MBA candidate at INSEAD. We'll start today with a panel that looks ahead to COP30. We're going to discuss what's expected, what challenges still lie ahead, and how Brazil can shape the global climate agenda in a meaningful way. With COP30 set to take place in Belém, Brazil has a unique opportunity to lead by example. Brazil's biodiversity, natural resources, and renewable energy position the country to push for continuous, ambitious climate change. In this session, we reflect on Brazil's evolving role in climate diplomacy, take stock of lessons learned from previous COPs, and discuss the key priorities and barriers that must be addressed to deliver impact at COP30. We'll also explore how Brazil can turn past commitments into action and the role the private sector can play in accelerating investments in scaling solutions. Please come on our stage, our moderator, Jorge Agrave, and the panelists, Nigel Topping, COP26, former UN climate change high-level champion and co-founder of Ambition Loop, and Michel Fredo, senior advisor and partner emeritus at BCG.
Thank you, Renan. Thank you, Michael and Nigel, for being with us today. It's a real pleasure to be here together with Michel. It's almost like an old friend and a Brazilian ambassador. It's the second Brazilian ambassador on stage today. And Nigel is someone I've been following for quite some time now, since Glasgow. So, as we heard from Ambassador Lilian Chagas a few minutes ago, there is a lot to do for COP30. So she told us a little bit about how Brazil is preparing. I would like to take this time to hear a little bit from the international community. What do you expect? And with all your learnings, what type of learnings can we apply to the Brazilian presidency so that we can deliver on all the expectations? So to start the conversation in this first round, I'd like to take us back a little bit to COP26, Nigel, where you were leading, Michel was supporting already. So the many initiatives that were created, especially in the action agenda, very successful, like GFANS, among many other. And since then, many of them advanced a lot. They also suffered some backlash. You've seen this, and I'd like to reflect on this. So I'll start with you, Nigel. So you were responsible main responsible for all the success of Glasgow. So what lessons can we learn in the action agenda in two aspects? How to build sectorial, cross-sector initiatives, but then also how to sustain them over time and make them last.
Yeah, thank you. I think the most important rule in building sectoral initiatives is to not start something new if there's already something good, but find the good thing and then make it better and elevate it. So I'm really encouraged by the thinking that we're seeing from the incoming Brazilian presidency in that sense of building on what's happened over many, many years. I think, I think you'll hear from Faustine later from Mission Possible. That's a good example of something which was already existing, and we embraced that within the action agenda, and it's very practical and continues now with work that you'll hear about later. I think the second thing that really matters is that initiatives need to have very concrete goals that are meaningful on a CEO's or a minister's timetable. So in COP26, we launched the breakthrough agenda, and that spirit of having very specific deployment goals, you see that across many initiatives now. Not all of them, but if you don't have a specific deployment target for 2030 or 2035, then no one knows where we're going. We can't measure progress. So I think. And that should be a deployment target in terms that the industry understands, but it should also have a capital deployment target as well, because obviously capital is one of the main things that's needed to drive implementation. So I think those would be the main things. Build on what's already there, have concrete deployment targets, and then keep using the same framework. And one of the things that's really encouraging to hear from Brazil is that really elevating the action agenda to the same level of importance as negotiations. We keep falling into a trap driven by the media and NGOs, and I think the UN itself, focusing obsessively on the negotiations. But as the ambassador says, there's not so much to negotiate now if we put 95% of our energy in the negotiations and don't elevate the action agenda. So I think that elevation of the action agenda under a Brazilian presidency and getting the governance right, I think something we didn't quite manage at COP26 was to make sure that the governance of the action agenda ensures continuity, because that continuity is really important. You can't keep changing targets or changing your focus. So build on what's been there, have specific targets, and maintain continuity with the right kind of governance.
Thanks, Nigel. Michel, so you've been supporting the COPs for the last years and supporting businesses for the last decades. Building on what Nigel just said, so what do you think, so over the last year since Glasgow, like what worked well? What could we have done differently to ensure that all the action agenda had this continuity that Nigel is saying?
Yes, I mean, building on okay, I can turn it on. Building on what Nigel was saying, I think, but first, my first observation is that the action agenda has grown in importance significantly since COP26, in fact, and probably thanks to you, Nigel, where you really helped the UK presidency to boost it at another level. And frankly, what works well, I'll go to what works less well, of course, but what works well is that now you can see that basically on all the major items and components of the action agenda, solutions exist. There are solutions. There are solutions on renewables with the cost going down. There's biofuels, you were mentioning biofuels, regenerative agriculture, you've got all the solutions that exist are already available. And behind those, you have real associations and organizations. You were quoting, Mission Possible, developed into ITA, but there's also IEA. There's a number of organizations, GFANs, that are existing, that really know the topics and what is working and fostering the right environment to push those solutions as far as they can. So we have today most of the solutions in hand. Maybe not all, but most of them. What works well, of course, first point is that in spite of negotiation trying to move forward and the action agenda with the mobilization getting into the play, emissions keep growing. So what works well is we don't get the results that we need to get. That's I would say the first point. And that goes with it. We're not going fast enough on the phasing out of fossil fuels and coal in particular. On the methane pledge, we had that again and again, but it's not generating the results. So the question is really, what do we need to do? The focus on the implementation over declaration, which is clearly the objective of COP30, is really important. As you said, don't reinvent new organization, no structure. One of the elements, one COP after the other, is that the host country has always a tendency to reinvent the wheel and to add to their agenda their own agenda. The agenda is already there. And therefore, as the solutions exist, you need to promote what is existing to get results. So binding agreement is an important, with timelines, as you said. It was the case for the breakthrough, but even more, making sure that they are binding. The dimension of equity and justice, again, that is promoted heavily by the Brazilian presidency, is a core component. There needs to be, vulnerable countries, but also vulnerable people needs to be on board. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. The other point that you see, because the agenda has been growing, we've added health, we've added nature, rightly so. It's one transformation. It's not going to be climate on one side and then you do the rest, at least from the corporation, but also for the country standpoint. But for the corporations, you do the transformation once. So you need to identify the materiality domain on climate, of course, but also on water, on pollution, on air, whatever it is, and make the transformation accordingly. So that's another one. And the last one is, as you said, it's continuity. But I think, again, the COP presidency has clearly said that its COP30 is, as you said, a veranda. But the veranda needs to continue, and there's COP31 and COP32, because once you put in place all this accountability and you accelerate those solutions that already exist to get full deployment and the CO2 really reducing, you need to monitor that and make sure that it happens and that all conditions in terms of policy, technology, whatever it is, are in place and can generate the results.
Thanks, Michel. So continue coming from the more strategic to more tactical advice here. So I know you were both advising governments and Dan Yoshpi, the Brazilian high-level champion. So and Nigel, coming back to you, when you want to reach progress and agreements among parties, among companies, among sectors, process matters, right? The way you engage with them matters a lot in order to build success. What are the 2-3 things that you are telling Dan Yoshpi, but also Ambassador Lilian and Ambassador André about how to build that process in a very tactical way so that we yield success at the end?
Well, some of them the ambassadors already explained. For example, saying we're going to have thematic pavilions. That's a process evolution. I don't think a presidency has owned that. It's happened a little bit by evolution, but saying because we need to organise ourselves around solution tracks, not around organisations. So we don't have 17 organisations working on nature. We have a nature pavilion. We have an energy pavilion. So I think that's a really good innovation. I think one thing which presidencies often underestimate is how many people in the world want to help. So I think if you look at the action agenda, which is more than the global stocktake actually, it's sort of, there's decisions which the party-driven process has created, the creation of the champion, the action agenda plan, which Gonzalo, the Chilean champion, and myself were mandated to deliver to COP26, and some of the decisions that have come that are related to the global stocktake before then, the Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda, which was embraced by the parties in COP27. So those lay out kind of an architecture for action. I think presidencies could go beyond, there's this, all the envoys have been appointed, but those are kind of geographic envoys internationally. I think a presidency could, for example, say, we know we need 70 green steel plants, I think Faustine will correct me if I'm wrong, by 2030, and we've only got, say, 4 that have reached final investment decision. I want to ask 2 industry ministers and 2 CEOs to bring to the COP 10 final investment decisions. So I think the presidencies could tap into the collective will to support them more than is normally done, and there's still time for that. And I do think that this laying out the 3 letters, if anyone hasn't read the 3 letters so far, these are very thoughtful letters talking about an evolution of the process. This is not a bomb going off and change the process. It's building on what's already been there, because we know that a party-driven process is very respectful of process. And we need to kind of open up and embrace some of the innovations which are a bit different from the consensus driving every single comment. For example, just a simple example is that this commitment to trebling renewables, that's not a consensus decision which every country has agreed to, but it's a much broader club of the willing, with many countries and many in the private sector agreeing to it. And I think if we're going to go as fast as we need, then the action agenda can't be constrained by consensus thinking, because consensus thinking always goes at the pace of the slowest. So we have to embrace the fact that the process has embraced coalitions of the willing, and make that the center of the action agenda. And the last thing, and I was really pleased to see this in the 3rd letter, which I've just read, is that we do need to tidy up the negotiating agenda, because every incoming presidency is presented with a list of 120 agenda items. It's overwhelming, and that alone distracts most presidencies from focusing on the action agenda. So I think tidying up the process is necessary, but remember, we're building on a lot of innovation that the party-driven process has already driven, and in particular this ability to have parties and non-parties coming together in these coalitions of the willing around these exponential goals.
Thanks, very interesting. Michel, you circulate among business leaders for a long time, right? So if you could select, what are the 2-3 things that would make most global business leaders happy, to hear from these letters, from the ambassadors, from Dan? What are the tipping point actions that the presidency and Dan can take to engage everyone in bolder action?
So I would start by saying everyone understands that the geopolitical context is very difficult and it's very complex, and it adds a lot to uncertainty. And from the corporation standpoint, what is necessary is more certainty and more accountability so that you can drive investments. And that's in a number of situations blocked. I think the NDCs are an opportunity to clarify by country what they want to do, what policies they're going to put. The finance agenda is going to be important, but it means that what in fact people are expecting is climate leadership. And what I hope is that it's not going to be climate leadership the way the French understand it, quite top-down. This is what you need to do. But adding to the skills that the diplomatic arm of Brazil has shown the world, adding this diplomatic approach so that we can really get the NDCs where it needs, so that the ambition goes from 2.7 to hopefully below 2 degrees. The finance commitments, the 1.3 trillion, which is a triggering effect to also channel those investments, and also more generally leverage the trade and industry for decarbonization so that the transition finance is there, etc., are very important components. So I would say having the ability of the COP30 presidency to initiate a leadership and a governance that goes with it, that integrates better, so that there is a better discussions and collaboration, so that we can drive and reduce uncertainty to get those projects financed and advanced and cooperation move forward, I think is a very critical element.
Thanks. Nigel, I saw you writing down something you want to add on Michel's point?
Yes, just 1.3 trillion is not the goal. It's 3.2 trillion. This is a really important point because quite often our whole conversation gets trapped in some of the narrow framing of the UNFCCC in 1992, where South Korea is a developing country, right? It's kind of a joke, right? But that's the way we were trapped, and sometimes we talk about it. So the reason I say it's not 1.3, it's 3.2 is one of the breakthroughs we made in COP27 was Mahmoud Mohidin, the Egyptian champion, and I commissioned the first Stern Songwe Bhattacharya paper. We said we're fed up with this conversation about 100 billion. We know it's a promise that's been made and it hasn't been met, so it's really important. It's a measure of trust, and the non-delivery erodes trust. But even if we had delivered 100 billion, we wouldn't have solved climate finance because that's a very small part of it. So please, can we take an engineering approach and work backwards? What do we need to do? How much will it cost? So we gave that task to Nick Stern, Vera Songwe, and Amma Bhattacharya. They came back and said it's 2.4 trillion a year for emerging markets, excluding China, by 2030, of which 1.4 is domestic resource mobilization and 1 is international. The numbers were updated for COP29, so it's 3.2 trillion, 1.9 domestic, 1.3 international. This is so important because if you want to attract international capital from outside the country and you haven't mobilized domestic resources, good luck. The CEO of the asset manager of the bank comes to the country and says, oh, show me some of the local financiers who are supporting this transition. And if the answer is, oh, we were hoping you would do that, then they're straight back on the plane. The people who understand the local context best are local finance providers. So I think we've lost something in this focus on 1.3. It's actually 3.2, of which 1.3 is from developed to developing. But it relies on the 1.9 of domestic resource mobilization. And here, with its sophisticated capital markets and with BNDES as a really helpful catalyst, Brazil's got a really good story to tell about mobilizing domestic finance as part of attracting capital from overseas. So that's what I was writing down, so I didn't forget, so thank you.
I think this is a very good segue to the next round, which is about how Brazil can seize this opportunity, right? So, of course, this is a global event. but Brazilians have a very high hope that Brazil can, finalize COP30 in a better position that it entered, especially from a global perspective. That we can reposition Brazil not only as part of a problem, that of course we are a big part of the problem, but also as a solutions hub for the world, and to attract partners and investors. So building on what you just said, do you think that ambition is realistic, that Brazil can also seize that opportunity to show this other side and the other side of the country and attract investment, attract partners, or is it just a dream? And what Brazilians have to do to transform that into a real opportunity?
Well, I think it's already happening. I mean, many of you will be attending or aware of the Brazil Climate Investment Week, which is in Sao Paulo in June 5th to 7th. And with Ambition, we're working with many of the partners there to build and demonstrate that there is a really rich pipeline of investable opportunities which are being invested in at a growing rate in Brazil. And if we can't tackle investing in nature-based solutions in Brazil, we have no chance in the rest of the world. But I think the signs are very positive that that's growing, the pipeline's strong, of real investable opportunities, and it's growing internationally. So I think Brazil can benefit, but also lead and provide a model for other countries around the world to attract capital. I also think it's really important, and the ambassador mentioned this, that the world doesn't just think about Brazil as nature-based solutions. It's also got some very interesting energy resources, and then things like green hydrogen and green ammonia, and the kind of import substitution, which many countries around the world would really love to get off the drug of hydrocarbons so that they can manufacture their own fertilizers for their own food industry. So I think there's a lot of interesting things happening industrially and in finance in Brazil, and a spotlight on Brazil can both encourage innovation but also show a model for the rest of the world. So yeah, I think the evidence is already there that things are moving in a very strong direction, and more people becoming aware of that by visiting Brazil in the run-up to and at the COP will be helpful.
Thanks. Just a quick marketing here. So in these sessions we won't have questions, but on the restoration session, on the breakouts later on, there are going to be more of conversation. So I would like to open the floor for everyone and then discuss, get deeper. So Ambassador Lilian mentioned nature-based solutions. You mentioned as well. There's a big opportunity, not the only one, but we're going to have the time to have questions and have a conversation about what each of us can do about it. Michel, as I mentioned, you've been an informal ambassador of Brazil. And what are your hints, your tips to business leaders in Brazil so that they can seize these opportunities? So when you sit down with CEOs, when you go to Brazil, what are the 2-3 things you say? So I think one of Nigel mentioned, do first and then ask for help later. But what are the things you tell them so that they really seize the opportunity of COP30?
So thank you for presenting me as an ambassador, but I don't think I deserve that yet. Working on it. So I'm going to answer with some humility. You forgive me for that. First, I mean, and you all know it, Brazil is a fantastic host for this COP in particular, and for related to climate, because not only Brazil is exposed to the whole range of the climate issues, but also Brazil, as you were describing, has solutions for most, whether it's biofuels, whether it's energy in general, whether it's low emissions transport, whether it's agriculture, and you name it, and forest, of course, etc. So Brazil is really the right place to be, and as we are going to have a solution type of COP, I think that, of course, the Brazilian corporations that are actors in developing those solutions need to be there, showcase, show what they're doing, and attract investment. So that's, for me, obvious. But, okay, the first tip is please attend the COP in Belém. It's not just for the Brazilians, for the others as well. I think that there is necessity to do a lot of advertising and ensuring that the right people at the right level attend, and for the Brazilian at least, I would say, and attend at senior level. People who are making actual decisions, I think, is very important, because you need to be a role model so that others internationally can come. Then, as corporations, I think that everything that corporation can do to force, to clarify what changes are needed to accelerate investment are welcome, whether it's on policies, whether it's on finance, or on capabilities or on technology. I think it's important that their voice is being heard, but what we're doing and the conditions to do more and to accelerate, I think is an important one. And therefore, both the showcasing of what they're doing today and the potential it has in Brazil and outside of Brazil is an important component, and that's what I think they should be doing, both on what actually they're doing and what they need to do more.
Thanks,
I just want a nuance to build on that. I think there are two types of private sector voice when it comes to saying what needs to happen to enable more investment, more innovation. One is the one that I know Michel is talking about, which comes from the experience of being a leader and leaning in and making things work and having some of the scars from how difficult it is to be an innovator. The other one is the defensive position, which comes from cowardice and followership, which says, we'll move when everybody else fixes the problems. Right? If that's your stance, don't show up. You're boring. You've already probably lost the race of innovation, and we don't need your advice because it's just not credible. But if you're moving and if you're winning and discovering what the real problems are through your commitment to action, then you have real credibility. Then you're part of the mutirao, which I think we're being called to.
This raises another point that you're making. That I think at the COP30 it is important to really nail what the cost of inaction is. It's true for Brazil, it's true for the whole world. I think insisting on the cost of inaction is a critical component so that people understand that in fact there's no choice and you need to act and you need to act fast. And by the way, there are opportunities to be seized, as I said. But this cost of inaction is important. And related to that, I think it's also important that corporations start showing that they're very serious about their adaptation agenda and the consequences of climate in terms of the resilience of the supply chains and what they're doing. But again, it's also an opportunity for some of them for investments that they can help doing in cities or wherever they are in terms of their operations, but also what they're doing in their own factories and locations, because that's, again, an important message that needs to be deployed, and it's not sufficiently today discussed, where I have the impression that when you talk about adaptation to cooperation, it only starts to be part of the agenda.
Thank you. So we have to close in 3 minutes, but I have to add a last question for you both. I'd like you to close your eyes and think about, the flight back from Belém to your home countries after the COP. If you imagine yourself in that flight coming home, what have happened in the COP that will make you really proud, to say that you'll never forget that you were in this COP, that you helped some process yield some success? What are the, on the NDCs revision, which is important, and on the action track, what are the 1-2 things that will make you really proud of the results of COP30?
Okay, well, I'll have two. As part of the UK's Climate Change Committee, which is the body which advises the government on the NDC, I hope that both Brazil's and the UK's leading and ambitious and early NDCs have been seen as a model which have inspired many others, because they're both extraordinary, coming from very different backgrounds, very different economies, but both very ambitious. And I hope that every day there's been a celebration of progress from multiple stakeholders, depending on the topic, that has been elevated by the presidency and covered in the press. And that has had at least as much coverage as elements of the negotiations. So that it's a much more vibrant story, fitting with the energy and the vibrancy of Brazil, about how the way we are coming together to solve problems, and that many of those people who were only thinking about what other people need to do to solve the problem for them, are now realizing that they need to get on the train as well.
Thank you, Nigel. Michel?
I was going to say I take a plane to Australia. That Brazil has convinced that there's the virage that you were discussing is taken, and that the succeeding COPs are going to follow the example and continue the work on the solutions development and making sure that there has been, of course, at COP30, very clear examples and highlights, but on all the initiatives that the momentum continues and people want to do a similar type of action agenda in COP31, COP32, and COP33.
Actually, we should point out that that partnership between the Latin American group and I can't remember what it's called, the group that includes the UK and France and Australia and Turkey, we don't know yet, have always collaborated well. We had the Lima Paris Action Agenda, which is really the birth of Paris. We had Chile and the UK on the breakthroughs and the new plan. And then I think there's a really great opportunity for Brazil to work with Australia or Turkey to continue that pattern of taking the governance of the action agenda to the next level.
No, he asked me to dream, so I dream to go to Australia. Sorry
Okay,
for
yeah.
that.
But that shows you're not yet an ambassador because you're picking sides and you're not allowed to.
I'm French.
So let's hope Michel has an amazing journey direct to Australia, and I'd like to give a round of applause for both of you. Thank you very much.